welcome back YouTube, Coyote here, and today I am finally bringing you the updated version of my Magicka Battle Bomber build. Now, I have taken to since calling the build Demolition, since it's not really a bomber anymore at all, but we're still just putting out ungodly amounts of damage and destruction. So if you like the name, if you hate the name, please comment below. If there's anything else that this build, this video ends up helping you learn, or something you dislike even, please let me know in the comments. It's a big help with the algorithm, as well as liking and subscribing, of course. But anyway, I will go over from top to bottom all of the changes, all of the details of the new build and setup. I will also include a Ravenwatch option suggestion that should also put out ungodly amounts of damage over there. As well, I'll be adding some analysis and other thoughts on sets and things I've tried since I put out the last video. So let's start here by taking a look at the base stats. I put 64 mag. This is something you can split off a little bit more into health. Obviously, this is all unbuffed. I'll tag in fade in another screenshot, but the weapon damage should hit about 5,800, just under 6,000. The crit and the pen is right at 38% and 15,000, which will go up. We are still using a source of major breach, and the spell resistance will get major resolve, which puts the spell resistance about 27,000, and the physical resistance, I believe, at 23,000. 22,000 maybe. Anyway, irrelevant. Moving on, we're using the food, the smoked bear haunch. We're pushing that recovery, which is also why I lean to not running vampire at the moment, but we'll get to the more details on that as we go through the video. I also am using the Lover's Mundus, getting a big amount of that 15k pen from that. Weapon damage does work as well, but I've always liked pen. I don't use corrosive on this setup, so it really works out for me. The first thing is the new set. So with Vicious Death, what basically ended up happening was I was dueling DJ a lot, and Vicious Death doesn't do anything in duels and one-on-ones because you kill them and you have to kill somebody to get the proc off of that. So I ended up trying several sets. I tried Dragonknight. I put back on my spinners, still a really good set, spinners. And ultimately, what I ended up trying and really liking was this Kavach Gladiator set. And you can see the 5th item here gives you 1,400 extra damage against targets below 25% health. Magicka doesn't have an explicit execute. Molten Whip sort of acts like one, with being able to double up the damage, but it's not something like Spin to Win or Executionaries that you can kind of spam as they get low, right? So this extra damage still applies to our dots and just makes you that much hefty on the bottom end. You'll also see a few changes here that I've opted to go with a two-handed mace, a maul, as opposed to a lightning staff. Now, I do have a gladiator's lightning staff. I switch these things all the time, but the two-handed has such really good passives. As well, the lightning staff was meant to boost that Vicious Death AoE on getting a kill, and the extra pen and the follow-up passives, the battle rush. I go back and forth a lot. I'm still using charged. Nernhoned might be a better option, but there are still a lot of little status effects that I do get from that, namely the shock damage. I ended up taking off the Flame one, since between one of the sets we're using and Burning Embers, they automatically proc burning, and now that it only procs once every 3 seconds, it's not entirely as important. I weighed the disease glyph, I weighed the shock glyph really a lot, and ultimately I think the shock, we just do so much damage all of the time that getting that minor vulnerability, that extra 5%, is just so huge. While disease is nice, it only affects their heals, and we end up vulnerability just adds when we already have them on their heels and running away or streaking away in a few sorts case. Now, before I get to the ice staff, I want to note that I've ended up taking to using this escapist poison as opposed to just the poison glyph that's on this staff. The poison glyph does help you get that stam and the combustion, but really stam hasn't been that much of an issue for me. The mag is a little bit, but we'll get to that. So I started using this poison. Immobilize gives us a bit of a stun since we don't use talons or fossilize as like a dedicated stun. It also grants us that unstoppable when we go to our back bar and we're trying to save ourselves, that we get this to proc and we can break free out of some of this crowd control that's all the way around. It also drains health from a bit of poison damage. It does proc the poison status effect and thus combustion, giving you that extra stand back, but not quite as often since it only ticks, twice over a couple seconds. The Magicka drain as well, we increase their cost, hopefully bringing up a cost of the heals here. My cats are messing around. As well, we get a bit of that Magicka back, which again, that sustain has been a little bit more of an issue. Now, we are using the Vada Shram Perfected Staff with a decisive trait, pushing that ultimate a little bit more. And the Wrath of Elements set, basically every time you use weakness to elements, which gives you major breach, which pushes us up to about 21k pen, we get this tether that does either flame, shock, or frost damage every second, increasing the longer the tether is applied to them. Now, those, that elemental damage can proc the status effects using the charged staff or the charged maul when we switch to our front bar. But now something else I have been using and I've experimented with is using the Master Sword and Board Puncturing Remedy to make us a little beefier, give us a little bit more health. And again, by using Puncture, our Pierce Armor, the morph of it, we also get Minor Breach as well, giving us 9,000 pen off of the one move, bringing us up to almost 25,000. Now, pros and cons, you're at range when you can be proccing weakness to elements as opposed to Pierce Armor. You have to get right in there. You have to get on them. This, we can sit back. We can hit 3 targets. It might not be as much damage, but I'm using the Magicka Steel morph. I'm getting the sustain, and the other morph works really well as well. Having that really long breach on your opponents, as well as more status effects that you could possibly get the shock, the flame, chilled, brittle, especially using an ice staff. It does work quite nicely. If you are going with the Sword and Board Puncturing Remedy on the back bar, I do recommend a lightning staff in this spot. Basically, having you need 1 bar to be able to heavy with and get some of the mag resources back. And really, that 10% AoE boost, it also, we do a lot of AoE damage. It is a really, really big boon versus the pen of the maul. And as well, we get a little bit of that charged effect with one of the passives, boosting our status effect chance by 100. That if you wanted to try Nirnhone, that is definitely something you can do, and something I'm looking to try for update 35 as well. So moving on to the rest of the sets, we are still using Gaze of Sithis, adding all this health, recovery, this 4,000 armor. It is also a heavy piece, so we get another big 2,400 off of that. I do still run all Divines, and all my other pieces are still 6 light. I run my paper armor. I love it. I love the crit. I love the pen. And with Gaze, I am still very, very tanky without vamp stage 3. The health recovery from this, the health recovery from our bear haunch, just make it is enough of a heal over time that it can absolutely work out without using undead. that is something I'm going to experiment and try again. Again, I would probably front bar a lightning staff. Now the deep breath, big two-handed heavy into a double molten whip, huge, especially with that 10% extra whip damage from the follow-up passive. But doing the same with the lightning staff just ends up being so nice. You get a lot of resources back, and then it isn't as required to run the Magicka steel weakness of elements morph as well. You could just hit them with this major breach for a minute long and get through everything fine. So rounding out that light armor, we have put on Burning Spell Weave and stuck with that. Burning Spell Weave, of course, giving you an automatic burning proc as well as 490 weapon and spell damage for 8 seconds whenever you do flame damage, and we are all flame damage, baby. So this goes off all of the time, and while I still like crit sets, while I still have put on Mother's Sorrow for this, and it might do a little bit more damage, I think Burning Spell Weave is a little bit more consistent. It's a little bit more consistent on the heals as opposed to relying on the crit. But really, either or. If you were running Ravenwatch, I would recommend putting Order's Wrath here over Mother's Sorrow. Kvatch Gladiator is no proc, so you could actually run a full crafted setup, especially if that's how you're first dipping into PvP. You likely have mats and a crafter already set up, good to go, and you can do that at relatively little cost without pushing all gold mats and everything else. We are still using Magicka Glyphs as well. I've thought about throwing a few tri-stats on, I just haven't gotten around to it. Shoulders, I'm using Valken Scoria, pushing that pen a little bit higher. You can see we're all divines here as well. Gladiators, again, is a crafted set, okay? So if you don't like running 1 heavy with 6 light, you could easily put a 5-1-1 setup on, take advantage of the Undaunted passive and boosting up your resources a little bit more. And then you could also rearrange this around to where maybe the chest is medium. Or again, maybe you want to be a little bit beefier. You can, instead of putting gladiators on the jewelry like I did, you could put Burning Spell Weave here, put on a heavy gladiator chest, put on, you know, say some heavy legs, some heavy feet, and be able to build up your tanky side versus your damage side. Again, especially if you're just getting into PvP and are working on getting the hang of things. Other changes to the gear, you can see here, instead of 2 Bloodthirsty, I have put 2 Infused on. This is partly because Gladiator does a big boost for you when you already are getting your opponents down. But I'm not gonna lie, I've been thinking about making another ring to actually try 2 Bloodthirsty, 1 Infused again. Thanks to Captain Crunch, great YouTuber, great gank builds. Go check him out if you haven't already. He informed me that when you get your opponent to 60%, that is the threshold that Bloodthirsty becomes more valuable than Infused. So I feel like I get a lot of opponents top end down fairly easily to where they get to that 50% mark, that maybe Bloodthirsty just really hits the accelerator on the way to this execute for Kvatch. But that remains to be seen. Either way, I think you can go if you could really switch it around. Infused does help with your heals a little bit more, but it's really not that much of a difference overall. The other thing you might also notice here is that I've put weapon damage glyphs on this versus the spell damage. That kind of, you know, was implied when we went over the stats earlier. But basically, that figures, right? But basically, with the Earth and Heart passive here, every time we proc molten weapons, oh, son of a bitch, man. Son of a bitch. All right. hold on. I don't know what's with my controller dying when I try to, you know, make a video out of something, but whatever. It happens. It's my thing now. Anyway, Earth and Heart passives. Every time we end up using molten armaments or anything out of the skill line, we end up getting minor brutality, increasing our weapon damage. Now, if you run a Templar, they use the Magmorph and give you that damage anyway, that it's not as big of a deal. But I run by myself sometimes, and sometimes you get separated in your groups and all. It's just good to have to ensure that you're getting the best, easiest damage when you're by yourself as well as in a group. So that, again, is why we have the weapon glyphs here. Since we are now in our skills, let's go over this. I am using Molten Whip, which of course gives you up to 3 stacks of Seething Fury when you're using Ardent Flame abilities, and up to 225 spell damage as you build up those stacks. That's part of the reason I use Burning Embers now as opposed to Talons, Engulfing Flames, and Flames of Oblivion. They will all build these Seething Fury stacks that give you double damage on your next whip proc. So going over the rest of the skills, Burning Embers, big flame damage, big flame dot, you heal for 50% of this damage. This is getting boosted up to 100% next patch with some of the changes, update 35. Whip it has several things going on with it, which that spell damage is going to be even more valuable now. Deep Breath. Deep Breath is my favorite bursty skill. This is what helps us burst people down. Helps us get a lot of that big quick damage. But as much as I've been on this skill about damage, I've underestimated the amount of heals that you get from that first proc of it here. Enough so that I'm thinking about actually trying the other morph next patch to see and counter some of these heal adjustments and everything that they've done with update 35, because we might not need as much bursty damage. So, but what I found I end up doing is I get in trouble with 2 or 3 people. I hit Deep Breath, and my thought was always that's going to burst and go off while I'm on my back bar and healing, hopefully getting them away from me a bit, right? But what I started noticing was I'd hit this, and I noticed how much of a heal I actually got from hitting 3 people and a pet or something. You know, whether a pet, whether it's an Atro, whether it's a bear, even a Blast Bones, and getting the heal off of, you know, 4 of those opponents, getting to my back bar, getting, you know, my Nature Resolve back up, hitting my coagulating blood, and basically surviving. So that's another thing that you might try if you're having a little bit more trouble with survivability, and something that I'm definitely more interested as we get into next patch. Flames of Oblivion as well. 3 fireballs, 3 heat-seeking missiles going to anybody in 15 meters. Also giving us that crit whenever we're on our front bar here. I end up using this as a little bit of a spammable, especially if somebody gets behind me or somebody starts moving away from me more. This is going to just seek right out and find them immediately. A big combo that I like using is hitting the Deep Breath, especially if somebody rolls behind me. You hit Deep Breath, you're going to get that burst in 2.5 seconds. Hit Flames of Oblivion, it's going to track right to them, and then ideally by then I've turned around and I can get another whip off on them. Or maybe it takes another move, I need another Flames of Oblivion orb before I hit off the whip, what have you. It's a good way to get a lot of damage on enemies trying to get away from you by rolling at you and rolling through you. And, you know, again, it self-tracks. It gives you time, considering how low ZOS has the sensitivity for controller on PlayStation. But that's besides the point. Moving on, we are using Ferocious Leap as opposed to Take Flight. That big extra physical damage doesn't concern us. We won't like this flame damage. We love the gap closing capability when you get a streaker running away, and they zoom out on you and you leap them and bring in that whip, especially if you had deep breath up already, man. It is so nice. And really the only movement skill that we have. It also gives you this big damage shield, again, helping with our survivability. You know, it helps us. It makes our light armor a little bit more sturdy. So that's how that goes. This is our flex spot, and I have tended to find that I just need vigor a little bit more this patch. That kind of Oaken Soul being more popular, damage being a bit easier to find. We just found, we all found whatever. There's more damage out there. You got to survive better. Cinderstorm still works really well here if you're going to be maybe playing more in a group, or if you end up in some of these bigger battles that just end up more compacted as opposed to spread out over an entire battlefield. Race Against Time, Channeled Excel are also good options. Even Blood Fountain from and getting that synergy proc is also another nice. Getting that health steal, even using Proxy Debt, I found some success with. But those non-healing options were a little bit harder to do on my own as opposed to when I was in a group. I would say I put Cinderstorm here, I think, the most often for when I'm running with a few buddies and trying to give them another heal, which might be hint hint with a major resolve going to Vigor next patch. And the Cinderstorm's gonna be killer. Very, very killer skill. Anyway, I also went to the Hardened Armor morph here, getting that damage shield again, emphasizing how to be a little bit tankier. This is one I feel like, this is one I've topsy-turvied with Volatile Armor a lot. Volatile is very nice, especially if you're dealing with a lot of gankers. That Spike Spray is another dot on them, and it will actually be flame damage next patch as well. But it's another dot. It breaks them out of stealth. You know, ideally you hit the Volatile Armor, you switch bars, maybe you catch them with a deep breath, even if they've stealthed out again, leap them, whip them, and just bring them down. Punish them for not wearing that Gaze of Sithis that makes you so tanky instead. You are practically a stand-up ganker. We are. I don't want to underestimate my tankiness, but I know I'm wearing 6th light armor. Alright, we aren't going to be the tankiest boy out there, but our damage makes up for it. And you basically end up in these moments that it's you take them down or they take you down. And at worst, you got maybe one of the best burst heals in the game anyway. So, moving on, Molten Armaments. I am trying to take as much... I'm trying to bask in that heavy attack boon as long as I can at this point, taking away one of the unique buffs that the Dragonknights had. But that said, 50% heavy attack damage. We get our major brutality here. You can absolutely use the other morph. It will bring the duration up to, I believe, 60 seconds. That will help your sustain. You don't have to cast it as often, and thus use that Magicka for your buffs. But that heavy attack, man, being able to go deep breath, heavy attack, into a big double whip if you have it built up, or even just a single whip, is a huge amount of damage that you can get in that 2.5–3 second window right there. Especially with that follow-up passive that's going to boost the whip from the two-handed skill line. But I can tell you, it was one of my favorite moves, even with the lightning staff, of hitting deep breath, getting that tick damage as that lightning just tracks away with them wherever they go and into that whip. That lightning heavy is actually really nice, especially as people try to get away from you more. You can kind of track them down, and that extra 50% really helps with that. Update 35 though, that doesn't exist. You get Empower or something. I'm not sure it's quite going to be worth it. I will likely switch morphs anyway. This is Elemental Drain. Like I was saying, I'm using the minor Magicka and trying to help my sustain out as much as I can, as well as that Major Breach. We're procking the tether from our Wrath of Elements staff as well. And again, this is another skill that I really do like the other morph. You get those elemental status effects, and you can hopefully proc with the charge front bar that we're using, hopefully get to proc their minor status effects as well. That also might make you change your mind to that disease glyph over the shock glyph if that's the morph that you go with. The Major Breach from that also lasts for a minute long. Very, very nice. Temporal Guard. This is just slotted for that minor protection when you're getting on your back bar. You're trying to get your heal. You're trying to let that vigor stay on you so that you can survive. Get your major resolve buff back. This is just to make you a little bit more tanky, survivable when you're hitting that oh shit button. This here also, if you are using the Puncturing Remedy, the Master Sword and Board out of Dragonstar Arena, this is where I would put your Pierce Armor, get that Minor Breach involved as well. And once again, I would probably recommend a front bar lightning style at that. One last thing I would also like to mention is that if you're just getting into this skill bar is a bit more difficult. Perhaps you end up liking the Flame Lash morph, the Lava Whip morph, that you end up getting that big spammable heal off of when they're stunned or immobilized. I would likely recommend taking off Burning Embers. You're going to be spamming and getting that heal more, that I think you won't need it as much, and that this would be a good spot for either Burning Talons to get the immobilized, getting right into your spammable whip, or getting over to Fossilize and using Petrify for the stun instead. I do really like Burning Talons. I've been using that on an under 50s that we might see here on YouTube soon as well. And it's another big burning damage dot. It does more damage while you're going through. And personally, I've never really liked how Fossilized worked. That said, if you really aren't liking Burning Ember or really want Burning Embers, I would probably recommend taking off Deep Breath at that point. But you are losing that burst heal and that burst damage. You know, that if you say hit Deep Breath, Burning Talons, and started flame lashing the hell out of them, especially if they're under the 6% that you get from engulfing flames, that's going to be a really nice setup. It should be really comfortable, giving you a lot of heals as well. And again, that kind of combo of hitting Deep Breath before going into your back bar to heal, to get that big burst heal initially, get some more damage while you're on your back bar, and give you that breathing room to get you to recover from being in the danger zone. Danger zone. So, lastly, let's go over the champion points here. My red tree isn't anything too spectacular. I use celerity. The movement speed helps, especially not having channeled acceleration anymore, but that said, I used it back then as well. Rejuvenation, just helping our recovery out. Fortified, getting more armor. We need a bit of tankiness and some more health again for tankiness and survivability. Moving over to the blue tree, this is where I've been experimenting and trying a few different things out here. I still have Master at Arms. Everything that we do damage-wise is direct damage. The upfront damage of Burning Embers and Engulfing Flames is direct damage, even though the dots are not. The same thing goes for Deep Breath, and Flames of Oblivion counts as direct damage as well. This basically boosts all the damage that we do, leap and all included. Biting Aura, we use more AoE than single damage abilities, especially if you're switching out Burning Embers for Burning Talons. This is something that is going to affect. Whip is basically the only thing that this doesn't help with, and Lord knows that doesn't need help anyway. I go for Fighting Finesse here as my third main one that I use. I get that guaranteed crit healing, that guaranteed crit damage all the time. You can put Backstabber here to guarantee the extra 2% when you're flanking, but for 2% and the lack of the crit heals, I just don't think it's as worth it anymore. And I keep hitting the wrong button. Now lastly, my cats again, man. Now lastly, I've been putting a few things in this third spot. I've put before Ironclad getting the 6% reduction of the direct damage I just talked about, but now that it's only 6 versus 10, it just seemed to, you know, kind of be the odd man out there with everything else that's kind of happened. Another option as well, particularly if you're using Burning Talons or going for a Flame Lash setup, you definitely want to be using this Exploiter, getting that 10% damage against off-balance enemies. Again, this kind of falls though with what I just talked about with Backstabber, that it's only damage oriented. It doesn't help your heals or anything else, and it being conditioned to only off-balance enemies as opposed to being up all the time, that's just going to be more up to you to decide if that's what you want to use. Now, of course, I've put on Occult Overload when I go up against a number of groups. It's cheap, free damage, especially in IC. It procs off of ads, you know, whether that's flag ads in Zero or any ads you come across in IC. This still procs upon their death as well. It ignores all resistances, it ignores Battle Spirit, it just is straight 13k damage, and when you're outnumbered, that is a big boost to put your opponents on their heels. It's something that I've liked when I'm on my own, particularly in maybe more even fights or just against more smaller groups, as opposed to a big old Zerg, has been Reaving Blows. While the heal doesn't come off of all the dot damage that we do, again, I just went over everything that we do is direct damage, and you get 7% off of that. It is noticeable. I do feel that my survivability helps, but whether you go with this, whether you go with Occult Overload, whether you my cursor's in the wrong spot, whether you go over here with Exploiter or just start and get a little tankier, reducing this direct damage more, I think they're all pretty good options. And even if you wanted to drop Fighting Finesse for one of those, I think that would be your best option from there. Keeping Master at Arms and Biting Aura up though for that additional straight up damage though, that is also I would recommend keeping those for sure, for sure. So closing out, I think we went over everything. Again, Vamp 3, I would put maybe the front bar lightning staff. You're gonna have to heavy for sustain, but that's something that I think I will actually experiment and really try to come to a consensus of which one is really truly better, if that extra undeath passive is really worth it or not. It's not something that I've tried in a while, but that should be everything over top to bottom of all the details about my demolition build here. Again, please comment if you've tried this build out, if there's things you would do different. What CP would you use instead? Is demolition even a good name? Is the paper armor and the 6 light too much? Anything you have to say, please feel free to let me know. The comments really do help with the algorithm. Again, please like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. It helps me out a little bit personally as well, especially for continuing to make builds and keep this updated and going. I really have a lot of fun with this build. This is definitely the build that I play on the absolute most, making my minor little tweaks with, and is easily my go-to character and build when I just want to kind of turn off, play a couple of battlegrounds, and just have a good time. Alright guys, well that really should be everything at this point. Again, comment, like, subscribe again. I'm really trying to push that at this point. And I really hope that you enjoyed this build, my go-to build. And I hope you have a lot of fun with it. And no matter what you do, Cyrodiil, Battlegrounds, Icy, it really is a blast. So, happy hunting and good night now.